Hello, this is Ernesto Riestra, co-founder in Jira, and I'm going to show you in this very short video an example where we are going to transform a blog post into complete learning content. So the first thing I'm doing here is I'm downloading a basic file set based on our Bloom toolkit, on our Bloom markup solution. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this blog post, and I want to thank here Helen Hirsch from Top 60 over 60. It's a nonprofit organization that is taking steps to raise the awareness about a pervasive problem that we have nowadays in the world, that is ageism. It's a very valuable content, and Helen and her organization are producing these blog posts that intend to sensibilize people about or make them aware of this problem and ways to have better conversations that do not have this ageism problem. So what you see now is what you're starting with the blog post. We are pasting that over into our text editor. What I'm using here is Visual Studio Code, and the advantage of using this tool is that we have many features that we wouldn't have in in a regular document editor. So first of all, you have the syntax highlight. So you're seeing all these elements that I'm formatting, and it's not important now to pay too much attention on the specifics of the language that we're using, but it's more what I want to show is how is the process of transforming this blog post into a more interactive experience. So what you see now is I just copied the text itself, and in the next minutes what I'm going to be doing is formatting this into a version that resembles more the original post. So I'm justifying the text to the left. So you see I'm using this type of tags. Everything that's inside of Bloom, of the markup system, is tagged with this attribute. You see there's a lot of these text elements. They're defined as text. And now what I'm doing is I'm adding a particle saying left and then P3. And what this is doing is setting up certain spaces between paragraphs and establishing a left alignment rule. And everything that's happening now is just text formatting. So for instance, we have here on the original blog, we have all of these different items. Some of them are bullet points. So we're going to be transforming this in an appropriate way so that it looks as much as we can as the original post. So, and the idea is that instead of having a passive text that someone will just read and perhaps have a way of communicating with comments or with other things, what we want to do is convert this into a Bloom content. And the advantage of Bloom is that you're going to be having many more opportunities to interact with the audience in real time. So what we're going to do at the end is we're going to upload the result into one of our Jira LMS installations. And out of that, we're going to make this content available, public to anywhere, to everywhere and anyone. And then the advantage is that once we have that, we can even have conversations right into the content. And we're going to be deciding what kind of interactions we want to have here. So a little bit more formatting here. You see now that we have these subtitles, and now we're going to have these bullet points, and for that we're going to use a very quick trick here. And a bit more about Bloom. The advantage of Bloom from a developer perspective is that it allows us to use some of the advantages of HTML5 in a more readable format. So you see that we're working on this pages.yaml. YAML is a markup language that is replacing in some systems what we would do with other JavaScript formats. Specifically, there's among others, there's a notation called JSON that is used everywhere to model not only data but in general JavaScript objects. And what we're doing here is, instead of using that format that's very complex in terms of the syntax, we're using this more readable format, YAML. You see that most of the syntax is related to these keywords. So now we're adding the first element here, that's a board. And you see in this board we have an item called instruction and something called stem. And you will see right away that these are related to a certain format. So you see the instruction is share your opinion here, and then the stem is a question. And it's asking, in this case, can you think of something better to say for any of these examples? So what we're doing is we're kind of reinforcing the idea that there's a certain language that is ageist, and what we want to do is to figure out other ways of saying the same, but without being ageist. So you can leave that to personal reflection for your users, your audience. But in this case, if we add a board, we're going to be able to have a social interaction with everyone coming into the blog. So what they will be able to do now is to answer this question, and you will see that the result comes as a kind of a post-it note on that board. So now what we're doing here is we're adding a survey. As you see then inside of Bloom, we have these capitalized items, which are objects that have these interactions. And we have in the library, we have a large amount of these interactions. Basically, they're divided in three: expositive content, that is presentations, videos, and anything that goes, let's say, in a unidirectional way. So the presenter is transferring this knowledge to an audience. Then we have the social learning elements. These cases we've seen, the survey and the board, are examples of this social interaction. That means your students are going to be able to interact with each other and exchange ideas and see what others think. And then we have the evaluative elements. We're not going to be using now any evaluation block here. But you see that what I'm doing now is copying from our library. I did a copy of the markup into my document here, into my example that's running on a local server. And I'm changing the text of these survey options. So you see, as soon as I have this, I can immediately interact with the content. I can test it, and I can see how my audience are going to be interacting with it. So we're just adding a few elements more. So we're going to be back into the library. I call this going shopping, because it's like you go to a shopping mall, you see what kind of interactions are out there. Then I copied here some code, and let's add another type of interaction. In this case, this is going to be a social rank. And the way a social rank works is by displaying cards or blocks and asking your users to order these blocks in the way they think it should be done. So imagine you want to prioritize something. You want to have 3 or 4 actions in a team, and then you want to collect what is the opinion of each and every one of your team members. What is the priority? What should we do first and then second, and so on. So this ranking tool, social rank, is going to allow us to summarize this order, and it gives again, it feedbacks the whole team about the general opinion. It's a way of having this voting system on a rank. So in the example, you have many options. In this case, I'm just going to put a couple of them. It's just an example. Perhaps later on we can, of course, improve this and think more thoroughly what kind of interactions we want to have, what kind of data we want to collect. And at this point, maybe it's important to mention that once you have your blog or your content and you upload that into a data platform, all of the data is going to be collected into a single data store inside of your content. And this simplifies the way in which you can generate all of these interactions, all of these systems. One of the ideas that I had when we developed Bloom, I had this very strong inspiration in some learning experiences that I was seeing online. And one of them is a site called brilliant.org, which is a platform, a teaching platform for mathematics. And what I love about Brilliant is that they don't start showing you theoretical content right away, but instead they'll start posting questions at the beginning. So the idea is that if you have these questions without having previous knowledge, it will have an effect on your motivation, because you are going to be facing in a way the reality of making a mistake, and then you will want to know how do you solve a problem. So it resembles more like real life. In real life, you face problems, you don't know how to solve them, but then by failing, then you start thinking about solutions in a more focused way than if you just come with knowledge of everything and then try to solve a quiz. So in a way, I see that Bloom can be the next level for not only for a company like Brilliant to develop these interactions. So of course, Brilliant is a company located in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. They have a good level of investment already, and they can use those resources to produce these interactions. But what about other smaller projects that don't have access to the funds or don't have this level of engineering available or technology? Then what happens with them? So what I see is that Bloom is going to be, it's not a fraction of those millions. It's infinitesimally smaller than what you need to invest. And for a few dollars a month, you can have these types of interactions without having to think about the programming aspects, without having to think about a database or a backend, or how do you collect data, and then how do you access that data. So everything is going to be available in minutes. So what you see here, and what's happening here is you see now there's a chat box where everyone can start interacting. And it looks like our content is already finished. So let's see if we can upload that into a server. And but before that, let's do something important. We need to identify who is having these interactions. So what we're going to do now is going to add a block that is responsible for collecting this identification data. And now this is important because something that is happening now in the e-learning sphere is that there are solutions coming out that don't have a learning platform at the center. So I call them LMS-less. So it's like they don't have an LMS. So you don't enroll users, you don't register users. You just put the content out there and people start using it. So how could it work if we have interactions, and if we have questions and we have quizzes, if we don't identify our users? So the idea here is to put a block where our users could just put their name and email. And this is very different from authentication. In the case of authentication, you have a database somewhere with a password codified in a way that it can be recognized by the front end. And then people would just go in and confirm their password. But to do that, they need to register or enroll into the course. They need to confirm their emails, and they need to go to a lot of friction just to get to the content. So the problem there is that it's hard to manage a high volume of users inside of an LMS. Even the most advanced and let's say major LMS systems have problems managing hundreds of thousands of users. It doesn't work very well. So something that's happening is called, another name that this is receiving is microlearning. And microlearning means you just have these contents out there and people can identify themselves like this. They just put a name and an email. It could also be a fake name. You don't need to put your real name, except if you want to have some evidence that you went through that course. Maybe it makes sense to put your actual name. But apart from that, it's only a matter of differentiating your own interaction from others, and then that's a way in which you can launch this content, launch this micro learning element, and then have people coming in. So what's happening now is that you're seeing that there's this block here, and we don't want to go into the interaction unless you fill out this form, very small form. And once you have that, there's many options. So the original template had a start button, but we're going to bypass that. We don't have a start button here. What we want to do is just display the next elements. And that's why we have this interesting object called trigger. What a trigger does is, once you go through that part of a content, it can activate other elements. So behind this, there is a very sophisticated real-time programming capability. It's something that's more related, instead of a programming language where you execute an instruction and then another instruction and so on, imperative, let's say, languages. In this case, this is an event-driven programming language. And this allows Bloom a very powerful capability, that is, we can produce content that is adaptive. So depending on user interactions, depending on the data that's being collected, and depending on the whole status or state of the content, you can deploy different parts of that content. So an example would be if you have a student coming into your content and having these interactions, and maybe he answers a quiz, and he doesn't, or she doesn't get a good result on that quiz. Then what you could do is display an extra content for that student, and only for that student. And if someone else comes and does well in the quiz, then maybe you can just skip some refreshing elements and then just go ahead with the content. So the problem with adaptive learning, of course, is the challenge that we still want to have teachers and instructors leading the learning process. So in a way, Bloom is not that much of a learning tool. Of course, you can use it for mock systems and other types of interactions where people just need to gain access to a content. But it's more valuable for as a teaching platform, as a teaching technology, where you still have an instructor leading the whole process and taking control of the interactions and displaying elements at will. So that's why it is important to see it this way. So okay, now we're going to upload our content as a zip file. So once we have that up, we already configured this public access element, and you see now there's this content is already published here. If I share this link with my friends and audience, they can access and they can start having these interactions. So well, this is what I wanted to show you. I think there's a lot of potential on this, and if you want to see this in more detail, just feel free to contact me. I can show you more about the system. But what I wanted to do up to this point is to give you this use case. How do you transform a blog post into an interactive content? and then how do you upload and publish that so that you can start right away getting these interactions. Thank you, and I'll be posting more on these examples.